Hey, everybody. Before we begin the show, I wanted to give a shout out to our friends at PowerPool. PowerPool is a mining pool and is one of the most profitable for miners. So if you have one miner at home or a fleet of miners at scale, point your workers to PowerPool to enjoy the best payouts. PowerPool supports a number of algorithms, SHA-256 for Bitcoin, X11 for Dash, and others. And of course, we're focused and we care about the most, S-CRYPT for Litecoin, Dogecoin, and now Bell's Coin, merge mining. Pointing your workers to PowerPool is easy with its simple user interface, and the platform also has all the reporting available that your operation needs. Typically, PowerPool extends a low 1% pool fee. However, if you register with the 84 million link in the show notes, you will lock in a sub 1% pool fee, which is excellent. Cheers, happy mining. Hello, welcome to the 84 Million podcast. Tonight we have a bonus episode. So we were on X Spaces on March 1st, and we had basically a discussion about mining, Litecoin hash rate, and just offered some opinions and sort of forecasts on where we think the space is going this year. So initially it was just Nathan Poole and myself. He's the Litecoin cowboy. He's been on the show in the past. And then we opened it up to kind of the community, and some other miners were among us, which was pretty neat. And we got to hear some perspectives from South America. So in the event that you were there, we thank you for attending. In the event that you weren't there, we wanted to do that replay now. So we hope you enjoy it. And cheers, everybody. Enjoy the show. Okay, everybody. Welcome to the 84 million space. First one of these we've ever done. So thanks for coming here. We've got Nate Poole with us, the Litecoin cowboy. He's up here on the stage with me. And I will let you guys kind of piggyback in a little while. We just want to kind of kick it off with Nathan first. But yeah, I hope to see some other miners in here. I can see at least two of them besides Nate, which is pretty cool. So anyway, let me introduce Nate, and then maybe you want to say something to us, my friend. Nate Poole, he's been a guest on the 84 Million podcast. He was one of our earlier guests back last year, I think. He's running a pretty significant, how should I say it? He's got a significant amount of hash power under his name at mini mines in Florida and North Carolina. And he'll go and share a little bit more about that tonight too. But anyway, Nate, you're just getting back on land. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back stateside.
Very good. Well, thanks for coming to the space. You know, this was something that you and I talked about. Actually, you initiated it about 2 weeks ago, and we've just been busy. So let's talk about Litecoin mining, hash rate, as it is titled, outlook and opinions. And then we can kind of piggyback on some other things and see what other folks in the kind of the space, if they have anything to add, but should be fun. Where are we at? We're in 2025. It is March 1st. Where are we at in terms of Litecoin history?
I think we're at the very beginning of that parabolic curve, right? And technically on a parabolic curve, right? Every point is the corner, if you will, turning the corner. But you just have to set the upper limit. And so depending on where you set the upper limit of a parabolic function, that's how you can say, hey, we turned that corner. And I think we're touching the months, not years, of turning that corner, both in terms of global adoption and hash rate. I mean, you can see the hash rate, going vertical, but again, it just depends on where you set the upper limits of it. But I think we're at that magic number where the adoption rate and the adoption growth, the hash rate growth percentage, the megawatts, I mean, the whole thing, everything is poised in this really, really beautiful position for us to do really well this year, I think.
So maybe we should just unpack what you're doing and kind of where you started. Some of us might not know you as well as others. So you started as a home miner. Now, kind of where are you at now?
Yeah, actually, we tripped and fell into it by the good graces of the Lord. Um, we, I've been a real estate investor for quite some time, and we had several real estate businesses, mortgage brokerage and a real estate brokerage and a general contracting firm. And so we built a bunch of commercial and government stuff, everything from roads and water parks and town halls and fire stations, police stations, that kind of stuff. Built a bunch of houses, and we did ton of remodels as we grew. And so the Lord, blessed our businesses, and we were doing really well. And COVID hit, and we said, you know what, let's take a. I said, kind of like the Forrest Gump thing. I told my wife, I said, I'm not a smart man, but I feel like if I'm really stupid, I can do really well in the stock market right now, because it had just tanked like 80%. I said, let me buy, let me give X amount of dollars, and I'll throw it in the market and see what I can do. And I got really lucky, because I'm, sitting there thinking I'm smart. I'm looking at fundamentals, and then the GameStop thing happened, and I had some stupid headphone company that exploded. Not because I'm some brilliant investor. I just got lucky. And so that did real well for me. And then we said, well, let's dabble in this crypto thing. And we bought a bunch of Doge when it was like 0.68 pennies. So less than 7/10 of a penny. We bought a bunch of it.
Right. Yeah.
And held it all the way up to a very large sum, and then most of the way back down. And you know, and that was my first really experience in the crypto space. And I said, you know what, I want to build a business. I want to take a particular amount of money and build a business. That's what we thought at the time was going to be risky, right? We said, hey, we have all these safe businesses, real estate based businesses, business development, land development, or land wholesaling. I mean, everything in real estate that you can do, I think we did it, small warehouses and, self-storage kind of stuff. And a little bit of everything, and a lot of some things. And we said, let's try and do a risky business. And so we said, let's mine. And we got into mining, saying we're looking at dollar ROI. We wanted tax advantage, which we later on found a love for it in that regard as well, because it's extremely tax advantage to mine. My wife's a CPA, and so we said, hey, look, we want a tax advantage business that's super high ROI, super risky, or so we thought at the time, and relatively passive income. And so we settled on mining. I came home, I researched around. I said, oh, I want something like that. And I said, I'm going to be a crypto miner. She says, well, what's that? I said, I have no idea, but that's what we're going to do. And so we'd set a chunk to start a new business, and that's what we did. So we started a business, and we ended up bringing in a friend of mine as a partner, and then down the road we brought in another friend as another partner, and we scaled it and grew. We launched a fund. I should probably know the type of it, but it's for accredited investors. And so we launched a fund where we basically sold equity shares of one of our companies that does Litecoin mining to accredited investors, where we take the funds from them and we buy computers, and then that grows the hash rate. And then, Lord willing, at a future date with an exit, and we're selling hopefully the whole business, if Lord allows us to, the whole business and the computers that go with it at I would like to think a nice multiple, and then the investors don't just get, hey, they profit on a computer, but they also profit on the way up, and they profit on the multiple of the exit on the way out. So that's kind of our business structure for that. But we actually have about 5 or 6 different entities that are mining out of our sites. We have a couple sites in Florida that we're not really using at the moment, because we have a bigger site in North Carolina that we kind of migrated to. So yeah, it started out as I had some L3 pluses and some handshake miners and Cadena miners and some GPU rigs for Ethereum, but before the merge, some Bitcoin miners all running out of the back in 2020, all running out of our house, and then we outgrew it. So I built a 1 megawatt spot. And then we outgrew that one. And then so now we're at a 7.5 megawatt site in North Carolina.
Good deal. Thanks for sharing that with us. And we'd probably all argue that what did you say? Make some comment about you're not the smartest guy. I think we'd all probably disagree with you on that. But and good to see, by the way, Robot, Benji, Luke, welcome to the space. Like I said, we're going to open this up in a little bit, but I wanted to kind of start out with Nate. We got a few miners in the room. This is great. So back to kind of maybe hash rate. Maybe we start with that. What are you seeing with hash rate since you started in 2021 versus now? I mean, it's going bonkers. And maybe you want to compare it to Bitcoin's in the past. I know in September, it's basically September 24 until now, it's basically doubled, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, it's growing really explosively. It's tough to figure out how many megawatts. Like you try and run the math to figure out how many megawatts of power are being used to really figure out the security. I like to measure it in terms of megawatts more so than hash rate, because that's a bit of a misnomer, right? Because, especially when you're comparing it to Bitcoin. But one of the things that's really got me excited about the space, specifically the Litecoin space, is that if you look at the Bitcoin hash rate in 2012, within about a year or so, they launched the first ever ASICs, and you could have taken over the entire Bitcoin network with 1 megawatt of power of ASICs. And it was about something like 2013-ish.
Yep.
And so you've got this multi-billion dollar asset that you could take over for, $2 million. It was very insecure at the time. And the supply in 2012, of course, was 3,600 Bitcoin a day being mined, which is today's amount that we're mining in Litecoin globally. And so the hash rate was about, at that time, so supply was 3,600 a day, and the hash rate was the equivalent of basically a megawatt or so of what you could do. And today's Litecoin hash rate is at least 14 to 1,500 megawatts. It's tough to say because, we don't know how much of this explosive growth is L9s. I presume a large portion of it is. So it might be towards the lower end of that range, maybe 1,300 megawatts of power. But it's definitely over 1,000 megawatts of power, which I think one of the things that has me really excited about that specific statistic is that means that Litecoin has reached what I call it escape velocity. I don't know if there's a proper term for it yet, but it's such a high megawatt amount that even nations couldn't overtake it, right? Like 1,000 megawatts is more than Silicon Valley controls. And so to be able to build out another 1,000 megawatt and then deploy sufficient L9s to do a 51% attack, at this point, it's impossible. And so that really is what excites me. Like there's some really great technologies out there. Some of which I like the tech behind it, some of which I don't. But Litecoin specifically, I think, is huge in that one regard. So I think the hash rate reaching that escape velocity where a billionaire can't take it over and nations can't take it over means that it and Bitcoin alone are at this point, in my opinion, destined to infinity in terms of price when compared to any fiat currency.
What would you say about the auxiliary proof of work coins that are merged to Litecoin, Bells, Doge?
I think it's really brilliant. And this is what, people give Charlie Lee a hard time, right? About, oh, you left the network, but he didn't. He actually became more involved, if you will, than Satoshi, and unless Satoshi is, one of these guys that we see actively engaged in it, which he might be. But this is fascinating because I think that Litecoin is the best. Let me give you a tale of three coins, right? Like, and I'm working on an article to this effect for Shan's publication.
Look into Litecoin.
Look into Litecoin, yeah,
perfect.
And but if you look at three coins, right? You look at Bitcoin, where it starts with this. It starts kind of out of the gate where Litecoin is now. So 12 years. Less time to build that base of hash rate adoption, etc. And you look at where Litecoin is, and I'm sorry, where Bitcoin is, and if you look at the like a graph, right? If you're looking at it as an exponential curve, it starts low and to the left, and then it goes up pretty rapidly up and to the right, right? Which is a great thing, right? It's been incredible for the price of Bitcoin, and that's a good, it's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. But if you look at, let's compare it to another coin though, Caspa, right? And the Caspa maxis, if you will, we're going on and on about how this was, Caspa is going to overtake Litecoin. Caspa is the next big thing. But the problem that they had is their hash rate, the way that their supply is given out, goes up and then to the right. So it looks more like a lowercase r instead of a hockey stick that goes over from left to right and then up.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is you don't have enough time to build a base of hash rate and a base of adoption and a base of usage and a base of users. And so what happens is you have all of this idea of, hey, we're gonna like Caspa, right? We're gonna launch past Bitcoin, that kind of idea. But it didn't play out that way. And I don't think we're gonna see it play out that way because they didn't have that base. And we say it in the price charts all the time, right? Like the longer the base, the higher the space, it goes afterwards, right? And I think that what merge mining does is it's allowed, and you can even see this like in the last cycle when Doge exploded up in price, because of whatever it was, whether it was Elon's tweets or something else, Doge explodes in price, which meant that Litecoin didn't need to, and Litecoin mining was still the most profitable. And so you've got this huge, long, over decade long base of users and adoption and growth and super cheap fees for transactions, and still have the most profitable mining enterprises over any other coin on the planet right now. And so it allows the hash rate to grow, get strong. It allows the user base and all these things to grow. And so Bitcoin has the right idea on the algorithm, right? And it had this big explosive vertical climb in price. And Caspa had the opposite idea. Hey, we're going to try and see if we can get the price first, but you can't. I think Caspa proves that you can't. You have to have the base of users and adoption. And Litecoin with the merge mining has allowed us to explode all usage metrics except for price, which is why I think in the same way that it's crazy, in the same way that Bitcoin beats Caspa, I think in the future, at some point, Litecoin beats Bitcoin, because at some point, let's say, Bitcoin goes to $1 million, which I think is inevitable at some point. I don't know when, but it will.
For sure.
And when it does, though, your transaction fees, because there's not really any significant merge mining, your transaction fees are going to be through the roof, to the thousands of dollars for every transaction. So it's going to be completely impossible to use Bitcoin for any small transaction. Like if you want to buy a house, great, use Bitcoin. But if you want to buy a car, it doesn't make any sense because you're adding 10% to the price of the car.
Right.
Whereas Litecoin, with all this merge mining, it's not just the low fees of Litecoin, but it allows this massively long, massively slow ribbon of growth just barely underneath Bitcoin, and still keep the fees super low. So I think that in the long run, when you look at people that, once it becomes apparent, and I think it's obvious to us, but it's not obvious to a lot of people, that aren't in the Litecoin space, that Bitcoin and Litecoin both, and only those two, go to infinity in terms of dollars. But when that happens, and Bitcoin is $1,000, $10,000, $15,000 to send any sum, no matter how small it is, everybody's going to flood to Litecoin, because even with Litecoin at $100,000 a coin, you're still talking pennies to send it because of all the excess revenues from merge mining. So I think that Charlie Lee and the foundation understood this. They knew it. They said, wait a second, let's build this huge base. They're not going to like me because they sold the coins. Okay, so be it. But they're building this massive base, and he's able, because he even though there's no CEO, he's the face of it, because the founder is known. And so you've got this massive amount of usage and users that are allowing, the network to be driven forward, and it's super profitable because the merge mining component. And so when you put all those things in, I think you've just got this massive storm of all the right circumstances in all the right places that I really do believe that Litecoin in the future will exceed Bitcoin price in terms of market cap, right? I don't know if it'll ever reach, beat the price. I don't know. But I do think in terms of market cap, it will be the number one coin, because when you've got one coin that's only held by institutions and one that's held by institutions and regular people, I think you've got a winning combination there. And that, I think, is large part due to merge mining.
And I think that's an interesting kind of distinction there too, because I think Bitcoin is becoming more elite, right? Governments are wanting to stack it. I mean, we're in the early stages of that, but people are pushing legislation to get strategic Bitcoin reserves at national and state levels, and some people love that, some people hate it. The point is, there's efforts to establish that, and part of that is kind of the prophecy coming true, right? This idea of Bitcoin as being digital gold and banks holding it and everything else. So some of that was old news that's actually materializing. But the point is, what's happening to Bitcoin is pretty wild. So yeah, I would agree that Litecoin, even though we're getting ETFs and things of that nature, maybe governments want to stack Litecoin down the road too. Probably they will. You still have the liquidity and the features that allow it to be way more accessible. So that's pretty interesting there. Let's look at the price. I don't often talk about price. You can listen to the Litecoin forecast with Why Litecoin. You can follow Master. By the way, welcome higher. Good to see you in the room. A lot of people do a lot of forecasting. I don't. If anything, I might be more of the bear case. Oh, it hit 390 to 420 twice. We're definitely going to hit that and probably generously go beyond it. But that's a conservative approach. You mentioned a minute ago about $100,000 single Litecoin, which, by the way, you're not the first person to say that. I remember a few years ago, Cliff High said that verbatim on one of his talks. And Bits is actually in the room too, which is funny because he shared one of his old Alta reports from several years ago. But where do you see this cycle Litecoin going?
That's the $84 million question, right? Look, I don't know. I'm not a chart reader. I'll start by saying that I'm not a chart reader, right? Like there's a bunch of guys that do a far better job at that than I do. And I do agree with Shan that I think that I agree with his models of what it should be worth. But like Warren Buffett said, the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent too, right? So I think that that's where it should be, right? Litecoin should be at least 25 grand a day, but it's not, right? It's, $125. And so the most, in my mind, the charts that make the most sense to me would put it like $8,900 for this year. And I know that for some that's a bear case and some that's a bull case. So I don't really know. Here's what I do think though. I do think this cycle is different, and that's a very scary thing and a very a risky position to take. But I do think this cycle is different for both Bitcoin and Litecoin. Obviously, the ETF purchases and the ETFs that are coming up for Litecoin, I think, are going to play into that. I do think that wherever we go, we're going to continue to have hard, corrections. But I don't think that the hard corrections that have been historic for Bitcoin and Litecoin, I don't think that those are going to be as severe as the past. Now, when I say that, you're talking coins that have dropped by, over 80%. And so 50% drops might be severe for your traditional investor, but for a crypto investor, it's like, that's it. It's only 50%. This is great, right? So we're a little bit hardened in that regard. So I don't know how high necessarily it goes. My 2 cents as a non-chart reader, the charts that have made the most sense to me say that, $8,900. So something around the $9,000 figure. But I do think that if there's strong ETF buying, I think we definitely see in the 5 figures. I think that those are really realistic. One thing I do know is in this market, in the crypto market specifically, when it comes to hard assets, and again, in my mind, there's only 2, Bitcoin and Litecoin, you never say it can't go that high. So if the number is 30 grand, if the number is 100 grand, you can't say it can't go that high because it absolutely can. And at some point, mathematically will. The question is just when. So I do think, like if you look at the power law, and if you look at the stock to flow model, right? Like we're less than 12 years away from, $1 million Litecoin. And I know that sounds crazy to us, but it probably sounded just as crazy to a Bitcoiner in 2012 when Bitcoin was $106 and it went up to $1,600, they're like, there's no way it's ever going to break $1,000. And then, 6 months later it did. And then people were still screaming, there's no way it'll ever break 10 grand and then 100 grand and then a million. And it's inevitable. Like, it's going to break every one of those metrics in the same way that Litecoin is going to break every one of those metrics. I'm firmly convinced before I'm of retirement age, one Litecoin will be over $1 million. And I'm pushing 40. So something like 15, 16 years from now, I think we'll see $1 million Litecoin for sure. So the question just is when, right? And I tend to think, I tend to think, again, going back to our first part of the conversation, that hockey stick of the adoption curve, right? That exponential curve. If we set the upper limits at a reasonable percentage of global wealth going into Bitcoin and Litecoin, I tend to think we'll probably see it a little bit sooner than that. So I don't think we're going to have to wait 16 years to see one Litecoin equaling $1 million in terms of US dollars. And that's at today's value, right? Like, if they keep going on a printing spree and they replace it with a CBDC, I'm just saying, in terms of purchasing power of a fiat dollar today, I think that's what we're going to see. For the patient, holding, not trading investor, I think that they'll be very, very well rewarded for that.
Yeah, wow, interesting. Yeah, and unfortunately, in these circumstances, in terms of just if inflation just continues to go on and on and on, then you're looking at $100 bunch of bananas. I mean, that sounds insane, but
Correct. Yeah.
but unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily mean the world's a better place. Could mean it's worse. But interesting takes on that. I do want to kind of comment on the ETFs, because we have Grayscale already with an exchange traded product with LTCN. They've filed to convert to an ETF. Of course, we have Canary leading the charge back in October, filing for an ETF. We have, who else? Hashdex, that's going to be kind of bundled. We have CoinShares, that's going to be an independent one with Litecoin. We have Monochrome, I believe, out in Australia. And I might be forgetting some, but and we're not even talking about the other groups out there, like Kathy Wood's ARK Invest, if they were going to jump on the bandwagon. But I just don't think we understand what scarcity is.
Yeah.
Because, and this goes into the miner reserves. You being a miner, let's comment on that. Like, is there even enough volume to meet the demand currently? I mean, I guess in a free market, there's always enough liquidity to meet every need, but it means automatic price adjustments, which again, in this case, would shoot it up extremely. So what's your take on the ETFs, just kind of supply crunch and scarcity with Litecoin?
Yeah. I mean, Albert Einstein, I think it was Albert Einstein, said something to the effect of the single greatest failure in the human mind is the inability to understand an exponential curve, right? And you have an exponentially more scarce asset. And if you look at what happened with some of the early Bitcoin cycles, and these guys, when the price goes up, these exchanges, when the price goes up, they don't have the Bitcoin to cover it. And they're because they're thinking there's no way it goes that high, and they don't have it to cover it. So I tend to think there's not enough Litecoin to cover it. I think that they're not anticipating a part of the benefit of having Litecoin be a sleeper for the last 7 or so years is that there's not enough Litecoin. And there, again, I mean, how many times you see people posting about it's a dead coin, dead coin, dead coin, and it's extremely much not a dead coin. And so I think what might end up happening is Bitcoin, the Bitcoin to Litecoin ratio corrects. Litecoin, I think, breaks through the upper limits of the Bitcoin Litecoin downward trend that's been in place for, whatever, over 8 years. And so I think we break through the upper limit of that to a new, basically recreate, trend reverse the downward trajectory against Bitcoin. And I think what might happen is these exchanges aren't going to have enough cash. No, they'll have enough cash, but they won't have enough Litecoin to cover it. So I think they're going to have to either choose between insolvency or buy it at whatever the fair market value is so they can deliver to their customers. So I think what might happen is they are probably going to be forced to sell some of their Bitcoin reserves, lowering Bitcoin price, and pump it into buying Litecoin at market price to provide that Litecoin to customers that are demanding physical delivery. Um, and so I do think it's the upward price explosion that's coming for Litecoin is going to be so dramatic that there's going to be some crunches on the exchange side where I don't think they're going to have enough to cover. And so I think now, but most of them have a significant Bitcoin reserve. So I think they're going to be forced to sell Bitcoin to cover their over leveraged position, if you will, if you want to call it that, right? They're saying, hey, we'll give you this Litecoin, but they don't have the Litecoin, so they got to buy it. So I think we're actually going to watch part of that Bitcoin Litecoin ratio when it gets destroyed will be because I think the exchanges are going to have to sell some of their Bitcoin reserves because almost all of their reserves are held in either cash or Bitcoin. They're going to have to sell some of that, lowering the price of Bitcoin so that they can acquire more Litecoin to deliver the physical delivery demands of the customer for Litecoin delivery. So I think that that'll even further exacerbate the top of that downward channel of the Bitcoin Litecoin ratio being exploded.
Wow. I was looking at charts in terms of miner reserves, and it looks like the current numbers, I haven't checked in a week or so, but I don't think it had a little spike and then it dropped down again. It's still historically low. The miners' reserves right now are equivalent to like Genesis month of the chain back in 2011
Yeah.
when there weren't even, I mean, granted, they had 50 Litecoin blocks, but there really wasn't a lot of Litecoin around at that point compared to now. So that's pretty wild. Let's just go to maybe some practical things. Then I want to open it up to some other miners who joined us and just kind of have a free for all here. They can just kind of talk to you, Nate, or me, or whatever, crosstalk. But let's just go down to kind of maybe you're a pretty established miner at this point. I mean, you started at home with some, I think you said L3s and L7s, and you've grown it significantly. What's the outlook for someone at home wanting to mine in 2025 with this hash rate, with the machines and their costs? What does it look like?
Um, we're in the closing days or weeks, maybe months. I don't think so. I think I think the upward price explosion is imminent, and when that happens, the price of the miners explodes with the price of the coins. So
You're
I
talking
think
about
that
L9s
yeah, I'm talking about L9s, correct?
and
But
L7s and maybe other ones. All of them.
L7s, yeah. I mean, all of them. The price of all of them is going to go way up. Um, so I think that if somebody was looking to get into mining, you're probably in the last days or weeks of being able to do so for the next at least year. Um, it depends on how fast that price goes up, but yeah, the upside of mining, I think, is really beautiful because you're not only with merge mining, when Litecoin goes up, you're probably going to watch a pretty decent uptick in several other altcoins that are proof of work, including the ones that are merge mined with Litecoin, like Doge and Bells and that kind and Digibyte and that kind of stuff. And so, I think we're looking at one of the things I like about mining specifically is you don't just have the coins, but as these other coins go up, you'll end up getting more coins per day, which is another unique feature of the merge mining being a significant portion of the revenue. Is like with Bitcoin, when price goes up, hash rate explodes, and there's nothing else to provide extra revenue. But when altcoins together go up, you don't just get more. Your Litecoin isn't just worth more; you get more Litecoin per day. And that is something that I think also is another huge advantage for Litecoin, just as a sole standalone coin, more so than Bitcoin, is you've got some significant players that you're, obviously being led by Dogecoin, that you're getting some of those revenues as well. And if you're choosing to stack those in Litecoin, which is what we are choosing to do, we sell all of our Dogecoin and stack the Litecoin and turn it into, and we will sell Litecoin only for more hash rate for Litecoin, right? But I think you're looking at a really great opportunity. Like even if you just say, hey, I can go snag one L9 and plug it into my dryer vent and vent it out or something, my dryer plug and then vent it out, through the soffit or whatever.
That actually could
There's
immediately be done. Yeah. With the conversion and you've got the port. Good
yeah,
suggestion.
yeah. We hooked our first 6 up behind our TV, right? We ran some 220 out to an exterior wall and hooked them right up to behind the TV. And we oil cooled them because we didn't want to blow our neighbors out with noise. And it sounded like an AC unit running outside of our house. And we had 6 L7s running, in a little closet behind the TV. But But I think that one of the beautiful things of it is you don't just have the upside of the coin and getting more coins, but then when it does get to a blow off top level, those computers have appreciated alongside your coins. So you don't just have however many coins you've mined plus that appreciation. You also have the upside of the computers themselves. So if you buy a computer for $1 and then you make $5 worth of coins off of it, your computer is also now worth $5 or $10. And so you're not just getting a 5x on your coins, you're getting another 5 or 10x on your computers. So it's almost a force multiplier to the upside of what you can do with as compared to just holding the coin. So we've really liked it. We've actually we haven't stacked a lot of Litecoin. We've stacked a lot of Hashrate. For years, all of our profit was just to buy more computers. And so 1 month, if we can buy 2 computers, or if 1 month we can buy 22 computers, we would just buy computers, and roll all the profits back into Hashrate. And so that's been our business model. And I'm glad it was, because with the difficulty lately, the network difficulty, we needed all the Hashrate we could get.
Well, yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I think the L7s in 2021, did they come out in 2021? Something like this.
I think so, yeah.
Well, when they came out, I remember they were up to 40K a machine. So you're looking at L9s around the teens, depending on where you're getting them. So if they were as high as, the former standard L7, which are still very much profitable, but the former standard of an L7 as high as 40,000, the L9, I mean, that could rise dramatically. And that's what you're describing if there's really a FOMO into mining, which I think has already occurred to a degree, seeing that hash rate has gone bonkers.
Yeah,
You're not seeing that price per the machines yet.
No, I do think that there's a bunch of really likely scenarios this year with what I think, and I'm a middle of the road guy, right? I'm not a bear or a bull in my mind, right? Or I guess everybody thinks they're in the middle of the road, I guess. But, even if the Litecoin price only were to hit, not even my target, let's say the Litecoin price hits three grand. Well, you're talking a $70,000-$80,000 L9. And if it hits 9 grand or 10 grand or 15 grand, you're talking $150,000 per computer for an L9 all day long. And I watched it happen in the last cycle. I mean, I watched Kadena miners, which is just a doo-doo coin. They went from they were like $1,200 to my recollection in 2020, and then Kadena hit this big lick, and all of a sudden they're selling for $170,000 a piece.
Wow!
And this is like
and those are used
due to Kadena. They were selling them for used, and they were sold out globally, and they were making $300,000 a month. So you didn't need to have them be profitable for a long time, which it was an altcoin, which makes sense, right? You don't expect a super small cap Kadena coin that most people haven't even heard of to go for forever. So they were selling, and they were sold out because they're like, look, people were thinking, all right, look, if I can get this machine for 170K, and if the price just stays semi high for 3 weeks, I'll make 50% on my money. Right. And they did, and they bought them up, and they made good money for, 6 weeks, and then it was back down. And then, now I have, I got some that were given to me. I have, a handful of them, we've never plugged them in because they've never been profitable. They came with some L7s, people, and I was like, sure, I mean, you can throw them in, but we've never plugged them in.
Wow, that's crazy. Anything you wanted to add about mining, hash rate, outlook, whatever, before we open up the room?
I think that's most of it. I mean, I do think that we're again at that launch stage, and I think we're at that launch stage in terms of total users. We're definitely at that launch stage in hash rate. We're at the launch stage in terms of the as you mentioned, the miner supply being so low, like when they first started mining and having it. I think all of these things together, if you just look at one piece of evidence, you could say, okay, let's overlook that piece of evidence. But when you look at 12 or 15 or 30 different pieces of evidence, there is no doubt in my mind, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again. But in my mind, no doubt that the winning coin for this cycle is Litecoin, in terms of upside, in terms of mining it, in terms of holding it. And especially one of the things I really love about holding Litecoin is that if it plummets 80%, I don't care, right? Like I'm firmly convinced in the math that this thing goes to 6 and then 7 figures in pre-retirement age for me. So, okay, I stacked 5 Litecoin. Well, if you just sit tight for long enough, that's enough to retire on, right? And so I think I think that type of upward mobility in terms of price is nothing's priced in, from the ETFs to the hash rate to the miner reserves to the new users to the total amount of holding wallets. I mean, none of this is priced in, to the scarcity, to the fact that none of the exchanges actually have what they're about to need to have in terms of Litecoin. I don't think any of it. I don't think anybody's fathomed the idea of exchanges being forced to sell Bitcoin to buy Litecoin. That's not priced in. And so none of these things are priced in. And any one piece of data taken at face value, you could overlook and say, well, that's just an anomaly. But when you take 20 really good, hard, publicly verifiable pieces of data like that, and you put them together, I think we're sitting in the perfect storm, in the perfect coin, at the perfect time and place. I don't think this type of opportunity hardly ever comes around, right? Like the 1990s .com bubble, you have an opportunity like this. You had an opportunity like this in 2012 with Bitcoin. You had an opportunity like this in 2007 and 8, just after the housing crash. Maybe an opportunity in 2020 after COVID when the whole market tanks 80%. So, I mean, in my adult investing life, I might have seen 4 or 5 of those. And thankfully, I've been lucky to have been at least a small part on a few of them. But I don't think that any of them touch the upside of what's about to happen for Litecoin. I really do think that this cycle and this particular coin at this particular time is the greatest investment of probably my life.
That's a good word. As we've been saying, higher. I'm going to open up the room. I'm going to let, and I appreciate you, Nate. Please hang around a little bit longer. By the way, we'll go as long as we need to on this space. This is our first one. I don't do this a lot. Well, we're grateful for you guys for coming in here. I'm going to open up Robot. We're going to give you the approval here, and Stackson, so you guys can speak if you'd like here. Got any questions for Nate or just any statements regarding the topic?
Hey man, this is GBX man. It's good evening, y'all. It's good to see y'all. Appreciate the talk. So yeah, I mean I've been in crypto for a while. A lot of people ask me about crypto. I got like a little crypto cafe out in Colombia here. We do events and stuff. So when people ask me, because it's a lot of Colombians, it's a lot of Latin Americans who like to know about crypto, they really interested in crypto, but it's no regulations here, and it's not illegal either, and they're not prosecuting anybody. So I always tell people, if you really want to get into crypto, you know, yes, it's people making millions. That's what they see the most. Yes, you can do that. Yes, okay. But if you really want to get into crypto, you have nothing. You can't lose. Like right now, like with the last 4 months, I always tell people, you can't lose Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin. Maybe I'll say Bell's Coin if they're real interested, but I tell people those just because damn near the most reputable, damn near you just can't go wrong. I say, yeah, Ethereum, but I always say it's some money laundering issues with Ethereum. It's a lot of that ICO type stuff. So, and then like with the way, like, and I feel like most people in this space, damn near from the first world, you might have a strong currency. I think most people here in that space, but like wages out in Latin America, for example, like Colombia, the minimum wage is like $250 a month. So it's a lot of people who can't even imagine living on that, in the United States. I'm from the United States. So when they think about that, okay, the minimum wage is $200. Most people getting paid $200 a month. If you upper class, damn near if you making 1,000 a month in Colombia. So I say if a Litecoin is 400,000 Colombian pesos, you're gonna at least make a million is gonna go up to 1,000,000 pesos. You see what I'm saying? And that's damn near the wage for a month, and that's amazing to them. You see what I'm saying? That's for most people here. That's wonderful. That's like, oh my gosh, because a lot of people don't do stocks. A lot of people not in the stock market, but they know about crypto, and it's a lot of scams here. So
Well, can you?
that's a good word.
I
Um,
I would say, go ahead.
I'll let you go in a second, Nate. That's a good word, and I think even with you describing that, that's just a little bit more than a doubling, which I think is very likely. That's like a low hanging fruit of the greatest of the greatest. But the nice thing about Litecoin is it's so cheap to send. So the people that are holding on to it, they can actually move it and use it as money and not get penalized. Do you take Litecoin at your cafe?
Yeah, we have Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin. It's not my cafe. I say I'm more of a collaborator. I know I said my cafe, but I'm kind of a part of it, but
Either way, good
it's
deal.
not.
That's awesome.
But we do a lot of collaborations. We exchange. Got a few ATMs in there, stuff like that. But a lot of people not even really focused on Litecoin. Even it's a Bitcoin, I guess, tailored cafe. But when I do my talks, I talk about Litecoin stuff like that, and you know, because I just say if you look at, I say the Litecoin is the twin brother, little brother of Bitcoin. So if you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is at $100,000, 400 million Colombian pesos. And you look at Litecoin, I tell them Litecoin is just like Bitcoin. It's 4 times faster. It does everything Bitcoin does. And look at the price. And
Yeah.
then like, okay, wow, okay. So if it does everything, then I make them come to the conclusion, do you think Litecoin could be as big as Bitcoin? And they're like, oh my fucking gosh. You see what I'm saying? So I don't mean to curse like that, but there. So it maybe we get a little, the people who have dollars, euros. Maybe we get a little. Oh, it's gonna go 12,000. This that. Okay, yeah, it can definitely happen, but the people here. I'm in Colombia right now. They're using it because they more need it. They're not gonna wait on the price. Yeah, the price is nice, but it's a lot of people, it's actually money, and a lot of people's first thought is, well, okay, what if it goes down? It can, and I was telling people back in like October, November, I think it went up from November, December. And I was telling my friends, they were like, I want to buy crypto. And then they was like, what do I make? How much you think I'll make, Robert? My name is Robert, by the way. So I'm like, well, this past month, I'm gonna tell you this because it happened. I can't tell you what you're gonna make, but this past month, it was the beginning of December, I think, and I was like, it went up like 100% Litecoin, and they're like, oh my gosh. So, um, and then I just like to stress the fact that it's another form of money. Yeah, you can make money cash out. Okay, that's fine, but also we had an ecosystem within the blockchain that's coming, um so it I think the most growth is in Latin America, to be honest with you, for cryptocurrency in general. um so yeah, that's my 2 cents. I try not to get people too big on the price. I know we got all these metrics, we got all these inside news, they know shit about, you know, Binance got 1,000,000 Litecoin. They don't know the shorting. They don't know about, oh, they don't have enough Litecoin. Oh, well, all these insider ETF stuff like that, but keeping it very, very simple is important to me for my clients, people we work with out here. Um, and I would just recommend to anyone in this space to keep that in mind for the people who actually ready to use it every day. You know what I mean?
Well, and Robert, you brought up a good point too, because when you're talking in the international currencies, I don't know how this is true, how it's possible, but it's true. the US dollar has actually been performing extremely well against other international currencies. So when we're talking percentage gains in US dollars, that gain is even more pronounced in other currencies because other currencies are significantly losing value against the dollar, which again is wild to me because we're printing so much of it, but that's what's still happening. And so whatever we see in the United States in terms of upside, the rest of the world, especially Latin America, sees an even more pronounced version of that because their currency is collapsing even faster than the US dollar is. So I think it's a real incredible opportunity for many countries, for people with many different currencies that aren't performing that well against the dollar to really, really hedge, not just against their native currency in that country, but also against the inflation of the US dollar in itself, which is in and of itself inflating out of control.
Good deal. I'm going to pass the mic to Robot.
I definitely agree, my friend.
Thanks, Stack.
I just wanted to ask a quick question to Stack is and you're kind of already touching on it, is how stable your native currency is. You know, you're talking about adopting Litecoin, Bitcoin, whatever. I mean, what is your own currency like? How much does its value fluctuate?
The Colombian peso is actually one of the stronger ones in Latin America within the most recent years. I would say I just lost my thought. I had it. Oh man. Yeah, I would say I'm from the United States, so I mean I get all that, but the Colombian
How long have you
peso
been
is
down there?
very, very stable and it's very strong. There's a lot of business influx in Colombia from, North America. So there's a lot of capital coming into Colombia, most definitely. The regulations are not there, but they're also saying, well, it's crypto. This is a parallel system. Use it at your own risk. So, that makes stuff a little easier. But there's some legal stuff with like, there's some stuff that has to be, followed to actually execute fully. But I would say Colombia is definitely 110% one of the main places for growth in crypto. And they're actually just talking about recently they want to get the laws clear ASAP. So I pretty much going to follow the U.S. Colombia, I always say Colombia is like really tight knit with United States with the and then like with Venezuela next door, they're very, dictatorship stuff like that. But for that partnership
How
that
hard?
we have with the United States, Colombia, there's a lot of political maneuvering, stuff like that, and illegality of crypto in Venezuela. Money laundering is very big here, so it's a lot of stuff to be aware of. But the influx is definitely in Colombia, and the future of crypto growth is in Colombia. I would say.
They make it pretty easy for you guys to do your sales in cryptocurrencies, though? I mean, how hard is it to be allowed to use Bitcoin, Litecoin, whatever, as a means of transacting?
It's just a matter of who accepts it, getting shops, locals on board. It's quite a few spots with crypto. You got a few crypto ATMs. There's a few. It's mainly people exchanging though. Just like for fiat, for pesos. So it's relatively easy. You just gotta look for it. We have a lot of groups. There was a Bitcoin day about last month for in Medellin, and they were from the United States, and that was the first time they came to jump up in Colombia, the first annual, and I just happened to see it actually, and I went and met them. They're good people, but that was just pure Bitcoin. So it's a lot of people just coming in. It's very easy, but like I said, it's a lot of some stuff with the legal, like captación de fondos. So like it's a lot of stuff you can't just jump out and like if you're like massive like it's really grassroots to be honest. Like all my clients are really grassroots and like word of mouth. They know me. They know me by face, so they can call me. They feel comfortable, until the app comes out. But if you do it like on a massive scale, there's they can shut you down, pay fines, stuff like that. So but it's very open, but they just don't like that because there's just a lot of scams and there's a lot of people, and they don't really use the phone like us. They use WhatsApp more, so that's a whole nother story. So
But
I
if I
would
could,
say it's easy, but if you fucking around, they're definitely gonna shut you down for sure.
if it helps, I'm looking at the USD to the COP chart, which is the Colombian peso. In the last 10 years, the Colombian peso has lost more than half of its purchasing power when talking in terms of US dollars. So, like, let's say that Litecoin stayed stable at $100. That one Litecoin would buy you twice as much. And the current year to date is like 6%. So, just in the last 60 days, the Colombian peso compared to the US dollar has lost like 5.87% of its purchasing power. So and the US dollar purchasing power is plummeting uh, something like that in terms of itself, right? So when you're talking about an upside potential of any crypto coin measured in US dollars, you're talking at basically another 5 to 10% on top of that annually in terms of the Colombian peso.
Yeah, I really honestly don't try to tell people to look at the upside and we know it's devaluation and stuff like that, but I tell them, you can it's a parallel interoperability. And I feel like that's very important. You need to be able to go back and forth quickly, seamlessly, you know, the dollar's not going away, these currencies, state, they're not going away necessarily. So I think my view is interoperability for crypto. And then, if that's a CBDC, I heard you mention that. You could one day maybe go from the crypto to the CBDC. Um, and I feel like Colombia is really going to follow what the United States does. So, um, it's 'cause it's a republic. It's a republic. They say uh, our states is supposed to be that, but you know, Colombia is really interesting because it's a real republic and it's the oldest republic in Latin America, or excuse me, all of the Americas pretty much. So, um, they're very progressive forward, but at the same time, they're going to follow the United States. But at the same time, they got the humanity. And, a lot of people don't like the president right now here, Petro, because they say he's a guerrilla, paramilitary when he was a young guy. But, he stood up to Trump with the deportees, for example, with the when he was trying to deport him back to Colombia. Um, and the thing was just like the humanity of it, putting people in cuffs. They weren't really offenders and stuff like that. It's more than 15,000 Americans in Colombia that's over their visa, irregular, like technically illegal. And he said that, but he said like we'll never put them in cuffs. So it's a lot of political maneuvering, and they just came out said we're gonna do these crypto regulations. So my point is, I know I'm rambling, but I tell people not to focus on the upside. I know we always, okay, 9,000 can go to 12, and go to, and it definitely can. And a lot of people here is day to day. You see what I'm saying? They're focusing on tomorrow because, to get 50,000 pesos in your hand for one day's of work is not that smooth here. You see what I'm saying? So, and that's $10. You see what I'm saying? and they don't pay hourly in Colombia. It's monthly pay, and you got to make it work till you get to the end of the month. And remember, the minimum wage is $2.50, and it's not a lot of people unless you work in the bank. You damn near not getting more than the minimum wage, unless you just, astute, up and aware, everyone's not like that, obviously, but, so I love to focus on the ecosystem that we're building inside of it, the ordinals and stuff like that. Cause a lot of people just day to day here, they damn near couldn't hold, that long. You see what I'm saying? So, so it's, it's coming along. It's coming along for sure.
Awesome, Stacks, and I appreciate you sharing all that. I don't think we hear a lot of like international perspectives, so that's pretty amazing. And I'm glad to hear that you're promoting and using Litecoin where you are. I'm gonna pivot to Robot. Sad Frog, you got your hand up, and I know Luke's in the room and Benji. If we could maybe pivot back to maybe mining hash rate and kind of the topic. Sad Frog, do you want to go?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me up here. It's an honor to be on stage with such prevalent players, like on Cowboy 84 million. Kyle, I appreciate you guys. Everybody in the space, you guys are awesome. If you're here, you're doing something right. I wanted to because what I wanted to highlight on this space is the state of cryptocurrency currently, and some of the conversations I've been having recently with quote unquote normies. I've been seeing a lot more interest in cryptocurrency as a whole this year than I ever have before from my day-to-day peers as you're working and stuff. And I believe it comes from the Solana meme coins that have been pushed that because everybody's hearing about Trump coin, Melania coin, all of this stuff. And if you're in this space, you most likely know that there is a clear divide on good crypto and bad crypto. And your bad crypto is going to be you can have your opinions on this, but my opinion is your proof of stakes. Your proof of stakes are going to have large players with large amounts of funds that will continue to keep gaining those funds, right? And those players will always have a majority voting power, right? They'll always have a majority voting power in the chain. And not only that, in a lot of these chains and cases, you can run your own validators. And by running your own validators, you're have a high percentage chance of, paying your own fees, creating your own volume. And with that, hypothetically, people are moving $1 a million times and telling the public that there's $1 million in volume. You can't do that with a proof of work system. If you're on a proof of work system, what does it mean? You have to prove that you did work. These currencies are backed by something now. And that's something that as a United States citizen, we haven't had since 1972. Debatably more recent. 1972, we had backing of gold. After that, we have backing of Saudi oil. Recently, in this past year or so, Saudi oil has actually swapped to the rubles, which you can directly see the translation of that in our modern politics and how we are approaching that topic. And, that's the sensitive one that I'm not going to, talk about here. But these are all things you need to keep in mind when you're looking at the future and how you want to position yourself. And I really liked how Staxon was talking about a parallel system, because that's really what the stuff is. It's an alternative bank account is what I've been telling people. And I think that's a good way to go into it, because right now we are at this precipice of change where we don't really know what's going to go on. I mean, there's so much unknown in the world of finance right now, where I want guarantees. And one guarantee that I have as a cryptocurrency miner is that my cryptocurrency is actually fundamentally backed by something now. And as an electrician, I can appreciate this more than I mean, I think everybody can appreciate it, but I really enjoy thinking about it. My currency is backed by electricity, the grid, the power, magnets spinning somewhere that someone is putting time and energy into to spin, and we are taking that energy and directly translating it into Litecoin, baby. So I just wanted to bring that up. If you guys are, if you have random people coming into you and talking about cryptocurrency, I think that is a huge point to use in your conversations. We actually have backed currency now. We're here again, and this is what we're doing. And Bitcoin, great. It's backed by electricity just the same. However, I think, Litecoin, you can move it around a little bit easier, a little bit better. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that, and thanks for my rant. And if you guys have any thoughts on that, I'm here for the conversation.
It's a good word.
You mind if I jump in?
Go for it, man. Yep.
So the first thing I want to say is I love that you guys are talking about power, because since you mentioned to me you're going to do this space, like the number one thing that I wanted to talk about is just the people to understand that mining generally is all about power. It's about hardware and power. And if you're looking at getting into mining, the first thing I would tell you is you need to secure power before anything else. Don't buy anything until you find a way somewhere where you can get power that makes you on the level of the big guys. Because I started out mining from home. My power was half as much as it costs now. This is pre-COVID versus after COVID. A lot has changed in the past couple of years. But the cost of power is the critical factor if you're going to make it as a miner. You don't have to go get your own site. I was scared of hosting at first. I thought it was kind of sketchy, but I do host my Litecoin miners now. My GPUs and CPUs are all still here at home, just because they're kind of high maintenance. But my ASICs are at a hosting facility, and that is specifically because that's where I found the cheapest power. So the number one thing is to secure cheap power, and you got to keep in mind that you are competing on a global scale. It's not just you versus your neighbor. It's you versus China or wherever. So the most important thing is how much you're paying for power. And the hardware, don't get me wrong. And hardware is kind of hard because it's a timing thing. But excuse me. That's the number one lesson that I've learned is mining generally is kind of a race to maximize the value of energy. And as much as the hardware is changing over time, like the energy capacity that exists anywhere changes a lot slower than the hardware does. And that's the absolute critical thing that you need to be aware of. Anybody who has super cheap power is going to have a leg up over you. What else did I have? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in, but as far as the price, and you guys are talking about Bitcoin, I see it as like there's this inflection point where a network reaches saturation. And I think that's what we've seen with Bitcoin. As far as the cost of a transaction, people are fighting for the capacity of the network. And Litecoin is almost there. It's not quite there. Bitcoin is there. It's why it's so expensive. It is surpassed its own capacity. Not all the time, but when you see congestion, it's because the network can only move so many transactions at a time. Litecoin isn't at the saturation rate where we have exceeded the capacity. And that's the point that I'm looking for as far as price movement. is when the number of transactions and the amount of money that's moving is exceeding the network's capability to keep up with. If we reach that point, that's when I think the price is going to start to really skyrocket, because people are going to start fighting for being not exactly first in line, but to get their transactions through in the next block. Bitcoin, if you ever watched TX Street, you guys know what that is. You can watch where Bitcoin's got like 100,000 transactions that are just sitting there waiting. And it's people that are hoping that their transaction is going to go at a lower price. And the people who want it quicker pay more. I think that has a lot to do with the price. We haven't quite reached that level yet, but I see that coming.
That's an interesting thought. I never thought of it like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, there's the coins. People are, there's 4 times as many coins. It's 4 times as fast, whatever, and that's fine. I mine more than just Litecoin. I've run a bunch of different algorithms, a bunch of different coins, and what I have seen is the transaction capacity. It doesn't matter what the price is going to be. Bitcoin can never keep up with the whole world's transaction needs, and neither can Litecoin. It's going to take more than a couple of networks if we're ever going to transition to where crypto does everything. It's not going to be one network. It can't be. It's going to be multiple networks to keep up with everything. So as one network reaches its capacity, I think a lot of it will shed off into the others. And that's just because that's the way it has to be. Bitcoin can only do, I forget what it is, like 2 megabytes per block every 10 minutes or something. And if you look at the block wars between Bitcoin and Bitcoin SB or Bitcoin Cash, the block size is all about how many transactions per block can happen. So that's the metric I'm watching to see when Litecoin's going to pop, which I think is destined to happen out of necessity as much as anything else. Just because Bitcoin's already reached its capacity. It's not used as money so much anymore. That's why it's transitioned to this store of value. It was supposed to be money. Well, it doesn't work as money because it can't keep up. So now it's been rebranded as like a store of value, whereas Litecoin is still being used as money. And as it gets used more and more and more is when I see it sort of transitioning naturally to kind of has to be a store of value, because at some point it will run out of capacity and then you'll have to supplement with something else. Or you can have layer 2s. Like that's one of the good things about Mimblewimble is you can add a whole bunch of other transactions that then are still secured on the Litecoin network, the Litecoin blockchain, but you have a side chain that can do all kinds of other stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah, Mimblewimble is huge for confidentiality, as well as just extra capacity. I think that's still underrated, and it's amazing. And the address shielding and everything else. Hey, Benji, did you want to share? By the way, Robot, thank you. I appreciate hearing your story. It's great having you up here.
Sure. I just had something quick to add. We were talking about how Litecoin is backed by electricity or can be, constituted by that. I think another thing that to keep in mind is that Litecoin is almost certainly more decentralized in terms of the structure of who is mining out there. We're seeing more and more countries and governments and really large corporations doing Bitcoin mining. It's not so obvious, and I would suspect that it's much more of smaller operators like myself or Litecoin Cowboy, than it is large corporations. That's my suspicion, and I hope it stays that way. And frankly, we can all be a part of it staying that way by getting into mining, whether that's building out infrastructure, having, I help to create hosting facilities, and I have a company that we also are a customer of our hosting facility. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else feels that way or has noticed that or has something to say, but I picked up on that, wanted to share.
Awesome. I think I hope that's true. And I think it's still accessible. I'm just commenting here. I'd love to hear other opinions on your statement, but I do think it's still possible, as Nate and I talked about earlier, to get in. I mean, I'm not saying an L9's cheap. It's not, but you can still get one. And yeah, you're not mining Bitcoin. I think at this point that's really out of touch for most people. But S-CRYPT is kind of the sweet spot. And yeah, I mean, we've had on the 84 Million podcast, Locotech on. I know there's been some delays with their rollout, but I mean, once those hash blades come out and now they have the barrel and double barrel, those should be pretty amazing too. It won't need special kind of receptacles on your wall, and they're just going to be way less energy hungry. So that will also help, but we're just waiting for product.
Did they not deliver any of those yet?
I think they've only been tested. I can't speak definitively.
I was really looking forward to those because that would be something you could slide into a desktop, because if I understand it correctly, it was supposed to be kind of like a GPU interface where a PCI Express slot, if you've got a decent computer at home, you could slide one of those in, and then if you got your desktop sitting there, you could just be
correct.
My Litecoin.
That was the original one. I think they're going to still release the hash blades, and they've been crowdfunding them for a while. But I think it's the stack or double stack or something like this. Those are going to be more on par with an L9, except that it's going to, I don't know how many watts they're going to take to run a unit, but it's going to be fractions of what you'd spend to run an L9. And again, you won't need an L630R or anything else. I think it's a standard receptacle and everything else. I'll leave it at that. Maybe somebody else knows. Nate, Luke.
Yeah, they've been promising them since before we got into Litecoin mining. They've been saying, "Hey, we're coming out with this in the spring." I do believe them. It's a publicly traded company. I think they're out of Denmark.
Norway. Yeah, and they get state funding. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. And they're great guys, right? Like Ben Miklazek is a great guy, and they're trustworthy people. And
sure, yeah.
And Ruben is on his team now. He's the guy that founded POWERPOOL, and he's on his team now. And I've seen them in action. I've seen the chips mining, but they just haven't yet been able to release them to the public, or produce them at any scale. So I think they have sufficient funding, and I know that they have the technology in hand. But our concern, specifically with a fund, is like we promise our investors, hey, we get these computers, and as soon as we can, we plug them in, and we don't deploy anything. If I can't have it in my hand mining and plugged in and running in less than 30 days, we don't get it. And so as of yet, we haven't been able to purchase any. But I think that has a dark side to it too. Not in a bad way, right? Like, advance is always good, but the downside, if you will, is that's going to change the Bitcoin mining world, right? If not just Litecoin, but Bitcoin. So if it is as efficient as they claim it to be, it's like something like 20 times more efficient than the most efficient ASICs today. So if you imagine in that regard, you could deploy the 51% attack, if you will, on the Litecoin network instead of needing 1,200 megawatts of power. You could do it with like less than 50, right? And so it basically takes the power of the network down to 50, and likewise it would do the same thing if they were to take that technology and apply it to Bitcoin, all of a sudden Bitcoin can be 51% attacked pretty easily. So I think that is it's a good thing, right? We want more efficient computers. But this I don't want to say scary part, but on a SWOT analysis, right? The threat, which is also an opportunity, but the threat is you've got a network right now that nobody can overtake, but with that technology, it could happen. So, and the same thing is true of Bitcoin, right? You've got a multi-trillion-dollar asset that all of a sudden can be taken down for $50 billion, or less. And so, I think that is going to come up with its own threats to the ecosystem, but again, I think it's in a good way, right? It's the same step forward as going from GPU mining to ASICs, and then from ASICs to FPGA, or hash blades. And so, I think it's a good thing. I think it's exciting. I can't wait to get my hands on some. As soon as they're produced, I'm excited to get some. But the dark side of the threat is a bad actor coming in that wants to 51% attack it and has, in the case of Litecoin, oh, hey, I've got 40 megawatts sitting right here at this little farm, which is a 40 megawatt farm is a relatively small farm in the global scheme of things. It's a very small farm, and somebody could get their hands on that and buy the company, and produce them at scale and own Litecoin, if you will. So I do think that but the practicality of it is the same as with Bitcoin and Litecoin, right? I don't think that will ever happen because you've got a large amount of people and a large amount of players that are willing to deploy at whatever cost to keep the network alive. And even if they did, all you're really doing is you'd probably end up with a fork.
I don't think their energy efficiency was that level of different. If I remember right, at least when they first were talking about those things, it was kind of in the neighborhood of what an L9 is right now. And then you got to remember, like, their ability to produce those chips is going to be the number one limiting factor. Like, there's no way they can produce them that fast.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, from a practical level, but if we're talking 3 years down the road, I think it was 200 watts, might have been 300 watts for a blade that does the like 80% of what one board on an L9 does. So basically like 4 blades, so 800 watts instead of 3,600 watts, maybe. So you're right. It might not be 5%. It might be, 30% of the use or something to that effect. But it's a sizable jump forward in technology. But with every sizable jump comes, same thing like we were talking about at the beginning with
the L7s versus the L3 Plus. I mean, I replaced all of my L3 Pluses with one L7 when they first came out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was crazy. Yeah. No, I get it. I agree. I'm just saying the production rate of the hardware, that's actually one of the reasons I like S-CRYPT versus SHA-256, for example, is if you've been watching Bitcoin hardware, like you can't keep up. Like, it's hard to make your money back unless you're getting just dirt cheap power, because the hash rate from one generation to the next is going up so fast. And just the hardware requirements for S-CRYPT seem to make it harder for the hardware development. Not prohibitively, but just reasonably. That's actually one of the reasons I like S-CRYPT so much. There's so many different algorithms out there, but S-CRYPT specifically is like, it's an ASIC, but they only progress so fast just because of the nature of the algorithm, and what it takes to make the next generation of hardware better is much harder than SHA-256, where every generation is almost like twice as fast as the last, and like you're chasing your ass trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, Bitcoin mining right now is not a profitable enterprise, in my opinion.
It actually kind of brings me back to the power, if you don't mind, real quick. Is one of the things I see that's a positive for Litecoin is that if you're looking at maximizing the value of your power generation, a lot of these places have their own. They're paired with a power plant. It's not just a hardware place. It's a power plant that a lot of these businesses are running off of. So they're trying to maximize the value of their power through mining. And one of the things that's working in Litecoin's favor right now is if you're investing into script hardware, you're getting a lot more for your money than if you're trying to invest into SHA-256. I think that's one of the things that's really helping us right now.
I've got a question for miners. In terms of the standard, L7 still profitable. Again, if you have stranded gas, you could run older units without issue because you're getting free energy. L9s are, the newest ones from Bitmain. But every now and again, we see other units that are boasting a really high hash rate capacity with whatever price tag they're putting on it. What do you judge, or how do you judge a unit and its trustworthiness or even availability? I know I spoke with you, Nate, about this before. Maybe you could share about it. I mean, if someone's going to get into mining, I don't want someone to accidentally buy a bunch of vaporware. So can maybe you touch on that point?
Yeah, I have an old school approach, and it might not be the right approach, but it's been our approach. And I'll use an analogy for my stuff hit the fan bag, right? I only use rifles that can take a 30-round AR mag, and I only use Glock 19s because 9mm is everywhere. Glock parts are everywhere. AR parts are everywhere. If you ever need them, shoot, you can go to your garage and manufacture them, right? And I use that same principle for the miners, even though there's like a What's miner is supposed to be the Honda of miners in terms of reliability, and they don't go down and they don't have problems. But the problem is that Bitmain, everything is made to Bitmain dimensions. The parts are ubiquitous. You can get a part almost anywhere for an L7. They're all over the place. A bunch of people know how to fix them. And so if you start going to these probably better miners, right? Like a SIG is a better gun than a Glock. But when it comes down to parts availability and being able to use them and know that you have an infinite amount of parts at your fingertips, we've just stuck with straight Bitmain equipment because there's so many more of them that the replacement parts are cheap. They're easily available everywhere. So we kind of stick with the most popular one. It's not necessarily the right call. It's just been our call. And I've been really grateful through the years that we've made that call because the parts are everywhere, right? Like if my first, second, third place favorite, repair guys aren't available, then I can go to the fourth guy, because everybody knows how to fix them. If I need to get a part on eBay, I can even get a part on eBay if I need to rush something, right? Or even, Amazon or something, right? And we, would very much like to not do that. So we buy in bulk straight from China. But the parts being everywhere and all the dimensions matching for all of the pieces are so convenient for us that we've just stuck with good old-fashioned, relatively reliable Bitmain computers.
And the form factor, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything's
just the shape of the machine.
Yeah, it just works, right? And I say that almost tongue in cheek because sometimes they don't just work, but and even the firmware, right? So like we run aftermarket firmware and overclock all our L7s, and it's pretty easily available. There's 4 or 5 different manufacturers that offer firmware for L7s aftermarket, and we've seen a beautiful increase in profitability using aftermarket firmware that we wouldn't have even if we got a more efficient What's miner computer, for example, or Avalon or Canaan or something. The firmware isn't nearly as readily available, if at all. And so we just say, hey, look, the first computers that the firmware comes out on, it's almost always the Bitmain stuff. So we just stick with what the firmware is available and the parts are available. So we've just our mine looks very boring and they all look the same, which is kind of how we like it.
Good deal.
Yeah, it kind of sucks though that the whole industry is kind of wedged into Antminer, honestly.
Yeah, it
which is
does.
unfortunate.
And they're a terrible company, in my opinion. But you kind of
they make the best machine right now. What are you going to do? Yeah.
And they also they're available, and that's what I wanted to bring up too. Like, you'll get your unit, but you got to vet where you're buying it. So if anybody's home mining, make sure you're not just picking some random website and sending them 12 grand, because you want to make sure you take delivery.
Yeah, and they're also almost impossible, other than like fans, they're almost impossible for your average person to work on. So if you're a home miner and you're thinking you're going to buy an ASIC, like, you're not going to fix it yourself for the most part if something happens. That's actually one of the reasons for me, the hosting has been awesome, is because they've got guys. My machine goes down, I just, tell them, hey, this machine's not working, can you look at it? Oh, blah blah blah, there's one of the boards is messed up, what do you want us to do? Send it off, fix it, I'll give you some money, whatever, see you later.
Yeah, that's good.
It's not like just having GPUs and CPUs and stuff. Like, you can't really, it's hard to fix a GPU too, but you could just go to Micro Center and buy a GPU today if you wanted to. Whereas a hash blade on a L7 or L9 or whatever, if there's something wrong with it, number one, it's very valuable and you're losing money every day it's not running. And two, there aren't just anybody anywhere that knows how to fix it. And even Antminer itself, even if it's brand new and it's under warranty, it's going to take forever to get them to work on it. So you're if you're trying to mine, you need to have some infrastructure in place to maintain the machines, as much as like just the power and just turning the thing on. It's not quite the same as just running a computer at home.
Yeah.
Good deal. Anybody else have anything they want to bring up? If not, we've been going for probably about an hour and a half. We could probably wind this thing down. I don't want to cut it off early, though, if somebody had something on their mind.
I think we're good for at least 2,500 this cycle. Is that? I've heard some crazy predictions. That's my prediction. That's what I'm hoping for.
Shan, do you want to take the mic here? We see you. All right. Well, Benji, good to hear from you. Robot, great to hear from you. Of course, Nate, Ian, you kind of kicked this whole thing off. Thanks for coming on. Everybody else in the room, we appreciate it. These spaces, we don't do a lot of them, but hopefully we can do them more often. TBD. Of course, the podcast, we're going to get you some more episodes on that coming in the future, so keep an eye out. And just thanks for chatting tonight, spending some time here. And see you next time, guys. Cheers. Have a good night. Long live Litecoin.
Yes.
All right, guys. Later.